If you don't believe in God, it actually triples your risk of, you have back pain for 3 weeks. You now have back pain in your brain and you hurt over and over again. It's neuroplasticity gone wrong. It's repressed rage that causes pain. It's really getting the rage out. So I'll put you in a session, you might go back to when you were molested. If the rage could come out, where would it go? And in their mind, they kill their perpetrator. And how many bad things happen to you? From physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect. People who have 4 or more have an increased risk of 7 of the top 10 leading causes of death. And people who have 6 or more die 20 years early. But you don't have to.
It's always good to see you. How are you? Probably have a lot going on. Is it a lot around the book or is it just like life?
The book, it's the White House, it's
Oh,
I'm creating a faith-based program called the Amen Whole 4. We already have hundreds of people signed up to do the program at church or homeless shelters. So I'm very excited. I filmed it Monday and Tuesday this week. So I'm glad I still have a voice.
I was actually going to ask you about that. That was one of the things that I'd written down as curiosities is if you've done brain scans on people that are praying or people that are religious and non-religious, because you said that like hope is an essential part of the healing process. And so I'm like, wow, that's literally targeted right at religion and or some kind of religious practice. And I feel like with everything that's gone on with like Charlie Kirk and all those things, it's like there's definitely a rise of reception, curiosity, and maybe yearning for these practices.
Well, it's part of the whole 4. You have to get your brain and body healthy, discipline your mind and deal with whatever past traumas you have, reconnect. Friendships are down 40% since 1990. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, that's
And
sad.
loneliness has skyrocketed, all with a sense of meaning and purpose. And if you don't believe in God, it actually triples your risk of depression. So if
Really?
you think we are here from the Big Bang with random chance, that's not a very hopeful place to be.
Why is that? Like, is there more evidence behind that?
I think it's the lack of meaning and purpose, the lack that you were created for a purpose. It's no, you weren't. You're just here by random chance. And if you believe in that stuff, you're done. The problem with that is 80% of the world has actually very deep spiritual beliefs. And I think, it's based on my experience, is it takes more faith to believe we're here by random chance. The fact that you and I have a relationship, that we communicate thoughtfully, lovingly, that's not random. That the second law of physics, which is entropy, things go
Mhm.
from order to disorder, sort of like my son's room when he was a teenager. That's the second law of physics, is things don't become more organized in the universe, they become less organized.
Yeah.
And, if you see a baby born, it doesn't seem random to me.
I feel like there is photos of when conception happens and it's a spark, which is just like magic.
It is magic if you think about it, right? I mean, it's clearly magical. I'm reading this great book I think you will like. It's called The Secret of Secrets. And it's by one of my favorite authors, Dan Brown. So Dan
Oh,
Brown, the Da
yeah.
Vinci Code,
Right, right. What's it called? The Secret of the Secret?
The Secret of Secrets. And it's about consciousness
Ah, yes, I
and
love that.
how the brain is a receiver. And when the brain's not right, the receiver's messed up.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I actually did a study. We have a foundation, Change Your Brain Foundation, that someone gave us a gift for us to do a prayer study.
Wow.
And so we studied prayer. I pray for you. We studied discernment, prophecy,
Hmm.
and speaking in tongues, which I found completely fascinating.
Wow. So just like free sounds, essentially, like like just some sort of like something like crazy
Well,
like
it's
that.
not so much free sounds, but it's channeling. And I have a channeler that we actually scanned as part of our normal study,
Oh, no
uh,
way.
which I thought was fascinating. And the idea is if you channel, you have to decrease the noise in your brain
Sure.
so that you can channel the universe. If you think of the brain
Yeah.
as in part a receiver. And so the hypothesis was when these people who are very experienced at speaking in tongues is they would drop their brain activity. And in fact, in 60% of people, that's exactly what happened. It was really interesting. In one, it was like they got hit with cocaine
What?
because their dopamine centers just sort of lit up like a light bulb. I'm like, I bet you do this a lot.
Wow.
This is probably very reinforcing.
Well, I was going
Uh,
to say, was that like evidence then? I mean, if you're doing the scan and you see that like the brain activity drop, dopamine go up, there's like,
Increased dopamine is not with dropping. In that person, he actually
wow.
activated his brain. But, I've also published studies on a Kundalini yoga
Oh,
form of
yeah.
meditation called Kirtan Kriya.
Right.
And it's really simple. It's just 12 minutes of sa, ta, na, ma. It's a
Yeah.
chanting
Yeah.
meditation and activated the prefrontal cortex, but calmed like psilocybin. It calmed the default mode network in the
Hmm.
brain, a little chatterbox in your brain that's always sort of running a commentary on your life. And I thought, oh, that was just so interesting. And then Andy Newberg, do you know Andy?
No.
You would love him. He wrote a New York Times bestselling book called Why Won't God Go Away? And he studied Tibetan monks and Franciscan nuns while they were meditating and praying.
Okay.
It was just so fascinating.
What did he discover?
Well, that when you pray or meditate, it activates your prefrontal cortex, but it actually calms your parietal lobes, top back part of your brain, and the default mode network, which is your sense of here and now. So you sort of lose time, but actually become more focused.
Wow. I mean, that's always what, like, at least in meditation, when I've done it, and I feel like I'm doing it. And I know that, like, I feel like you hear a million times there's no right or wrong way to meditate. But when I feel like I'm really in it, that's really where sort of that time and space, even my body necessarily doesn't, I can't like feel the edges of it anymore. Like when my hands are on my knees, I don't have a sense for my size anymore. Like I feel tall, I guess, if I could feel anything. Like I just feel there's like a expansion feeling. But definitely time is one of those things that goes. And especially when you kind of almost like feel like maybe did I fall asleep or where did I disappear to? I went far away.
Well, and that's what happens in a hypnotic state.
Mm,
Early in my career, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I took a month elective in hypnosis in medical school.
really?
And I just hypnotized everybody. And I have so many great stories. My
Oh my
first
God.
three published papers were on Parkinson tremor goes away in a hypnotic trance. A cardiac arrhythmia went away in a hypnotic trance.
Did it come back after they came to, or was it okay?
Well, not the arrhythmia in this person, but there's this interesting connection between Parkinsonian tremors and sleep,
Hmm.
that when people with Parkinson's go to sleep, the tremor goes away. And I had a patient I dearly loved when I was an intern, and he wanted a sleeping medication like all people in the hospital. And I'm like, well, sure, but can I hypnotize you first? And when I put him in a trance, I noticed his tremor went away before he went to sleep. And I'm like, oh, there's some sort of connection between a hypnotic state and sleep and calming your nervous system. And then the next morning on grand rounds, I told my professor, the attending, what happened, and he rolled his eyes at me. And you could just hear, why do I have to deal with these psychiatric things?
Wow. He didn't believe that you were putting him in a hypnotic state. He was like, oh, he fell asleep.
And so I got mad, and I'm like, no, watch. And so in front of like 8 of my other resident intern class and him, I put him in a hypnotic trance, and his tremor went away. And then Dr. Jabari was his name. He's like, this afternoon, we're going to do a EEG while you do this. And the same thing happened. And then we published that paper.
Why do you think it happened? What's happening?
I think there's something going on in the brain that puts you in a meditative state, if you will, during a hypnotic trance. And his theta waves went way up, which is sort of relaxed daydreaming in a trance. It was fascinating.
Could it be some level of like consciousness being the idea of it being non-local? Essentially, you kind of your point of attention is not on the body anymore. So you're tapping into some other frequency or dimension of existence that's just not grounded or in that state that has the tremor. So you go to a new one, like a sleep
I
state,
think
right?
that's
Like, I mean,
possible. Or it's bringing more healthy activity to his basal ganglia, which are the things that sort of die. Parkinson's, there's an area of your brainstem called the substantia nigra. It produces dopamine. And when those cells die, they can't get dopamine to this area of the brain called the basal ganglia. And somehow it smooths out that connection.
I feel like I've read up on the SGB shot, the stellate ganglion block shot. What is that? Tell me about that.
So their stellate ganglia in your neck, they tend to become more active, or your brain sends signals to them to become more active when you've had emotional trauma. Or when you're really anxious, or when you're really stressed. And injecting those with lidocaine, of all things, a local anesthesia, has been found in some people to dramatically decrease the stress response. And it's been shown to be helpful for PTSD, for anxiety.
Have you studied brains before and after that?
I have. Actually, in my podcast, I just interviewed Jamie Mustard, and he wrote a book about this.
Do you believe in it? Do you like it?
I believe it can be helpful for some patients.
Do you think
And the
it's a
question would
Band-Aid?
be,
Maybe it's a Band-Aid of some sort?
or you think of it maybe like resetting things.
Mm,
Now, if you reset it, but you don't teach people how to not believe every stupid thing they think,
Damn ants.
don't teach them how to love and care for their brains, then they'll relapse. It's sort of like if you do plant medicine and it reboots things, but you don't do things to take care of your brain, it's not going to have a positive long-term benefit.
Right. I feel like I've heard that it sort of stops things still happen, you notice them, you're aware, but instead of there being like a hormonal sort of response or cascade effect or loop that ends up happening, it blocks that. And so maybe there's some level of neuroplasticity that's like able to happen when you just don't keep refiring those pathways of anxiety and fear, and maybe they atrophy and others grow as you're not in that loop anymore. I think that's possible.
I'm sort of a bigger fan of these whole 4 strategies, like getting your brain healthy and processing trauma. I think you and I have talked about EMDR.
Oh yeah.
Actually, in my new book,
There's a whole there's a section in it.
There's a lot on
Yeah.
both EMDR and another treatment I don't know that we've talked about called ISTDP,
What's that?
intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy. So when I was working on the book, I read a lot of John Sarno's work. Have you
I was
read
going to
his
ask
work?
about him. No, but I've bought it for a couple of people before because I've heard that, I mean, the book is basically rooted in the fact that the back pain is more of a psychological or mental thing than it is an actual physiological pain,
Well, and so I would
right?
rephrase it that back pain gets stuck in your brain. I mean, the whole idea of change your brain, change your pain is that both physical and emotional pain run on the same circuits of the brain. And that why does SAMe, the supplement S-adenosylmethionine, work for depression and arthritis? Why is Cymbalta, the antidepressant that is FDA approved for chronic pain? Why? Because they run on the same circuits in the
Ah.
brain. So if you have back pain for 3 weeks, you now have back pain in your brain. So it's not psychological, it's
Mm,
physical
mm.
that those circuits now start becoming inflamed and you hurt over and over again.
So
And it's
you keep reaffirming to yourself over a certain period of time, and then it just ends up becoming a pattern.
right. So it's neuroplasticity
Yeah.
gone wrong. Most people think of neuroplasticity as a good thing, but it's just a thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's whatever you repeat, your brain wires, good or bad,
Right, for
health
sure.
or illness. So when you were racing and you did the same things over and over again, well, they were not conscious anymore. That,
Right,
most of it's unconscious or
right,
subconscious. The star of the book is called the doom loop. It's how do
right.
you get into pain and how do you get out
The doom
of
loop. I
pain?
love that.
It's the doom loop, which is, pain happens for whatever reason. And it could be aspartame. There's a whole section in the book
Oh
on
my God.
aspartame activates pain and anxiety. But for whatever reason, which then activates the suffering circuit. So there are three pain circuits in the brain. I feel pain, I suffer with pain, or I calm pain. So I talk about the neuroscience of those three circuits. Pain for any reason, even heartbreak can activate these circuits. In fact, a lot of my patients who get suicidal, it's often around a breakup because it's just so painful. And did you know that Tylenol, I know Tylenol's been in the news recently, but Tylenol actually helps the pain of heartache. And Advil helps for women, but not for men. Why? I don't think anybody knows. But I think it's just so interesting
Wow.
when we lose someone we
Huh.
love, these circuits activate, which then cause an invasion of ants, automatic negative thoughts, which then lead to nervous tension, which then leads to bad habits, and then keeps the cycle of pain going. I talk about the doom loop and then the healing loop. All right, well, how do you get out of it? And you'll love the first part of it. The R is recognize the pain triggers. So every day you win or you learn. That if you have no pain, that's a great day. But if you're in pain, it's like, well, what happened? And,
I love
one
it.
of the things
It's
I learned from,
information, right?
yeah. And I find with the athletes that I work with, um, it's just win or learn. That there's no failure. And one of the stars in the book is Alicia Newman. She's an Olympic pole vaulter from Canada who
Mm.
came to see me and she was just a mess. She had a bad concussion and something called Irlen syndrome. Have you ever heard of Irlen syndrome?
That.
Well, you know my friend Dave Asprey,
Yeah.
and he always wears these yellow glasses
Oh yeah.
because he has Irlen syndrome. So
Good dude.
Irlen syndrome is a visual processing problem where certain colors of the light spectrum agitate you, bother you, give you migraines, give you anxiety, give you irritability. You have trouble reading. When you read, words jump around or move around on the page and have depth perception problems. And wearing colored filtered lenses just calms you down. Well, Alicia had a bad concussion. She's in a meet in Iowa, fell in a bathtub, got knocked out. When you have depth perception problems as a pole vaulter, that's a very bad thing.
No
And
kidding.
she went to the delayed Olympics because of COVID in Japan, and the lights in the stadium, she didn't jump one bar. And this is a girl who, for the
Oh
last
my
10
God.
years, has been
That had to have been traumatic
it was so traumatic.
and
And on
confusing.
the way home from Japan, she got drunk and then found me on Instagram
See, not alcohol is not all bad.
she came, she did my show like you did, Scab My Brain. And we just, like you and I, just love each other. And I helped her. We did maybe 50 sessions of EMDR, got her
Whoa,
early lenses,
that's a
treating.
lot.
Yeah, but when there's a lot in the, you know, in your past, it processes things. But, we ended up doing maybe 15 sessions for the things in the past. We did most of it for peak performance. We did most of it seeing her jumping at an Olympic level. And I
Mm,
actually went with her to Paris and she got the bronze medal. And it was just so much fun.
super
Uh,
exciting.
Win or learn. And that's what she said in her post Olympic interview. She said, I didn't lose at all this year, but I did a lot of learning. And
Mm.
one of the fun things, she would eat dried mangoes before a meet. And then in the middle of the meet, she'd go, do I really want to be here? I mean, she's like worked her whole life for this. And then she go, do I really want to be here? I'm like, oh, you have low blood sugar. Because and it's this carb loading nonsense that many athletes do. It's like we had her wear a continuous glucose monitor
Yeah.
for 3 months, and she realized the dried mangoes dropped her blood sugar, right? Went up and
Oh
then
my
down.
God, it relaxed her,
And so
right? Is
she
that what it would have done, right?
that lowered her blood sugar, which means she's anxious, she's irritable, she's less motivated, less
Mhm.
focused. And so she'd eat an apple with almond butter
Yeah.
and bring some turkey with her and
Yeah,
just kept
stabilize.
her blood sugar stable. So a lot of the MDR, yes, originally get the trauma out, but then use it to perform at your highest level.
Did you find that when you did the sessions with her in the EMDR, was there you went back in time, you said for a portion of them, was there things to uncover that you guys didn't realize was there, or that she didn't realize was there? Like something that she blocked out of her memory, or just things that she remembered but didn't think were important, or both?
There was nothing like, oh my God,
Yeah.
but went back to a lot of bullying.
Mm.
And a lot of what other people thought of her was very painful. And then she had a national scandal. She was engaged to an NFL player. It came out publicly that there was domestic violence and was very painful for her. So with worldwide fame often comes worldwide shame and but then going back to her original injury. She wanted to be a gymnast, but she ended up breaking her back when she was 11 and only came to pole vaulting a couple of years later.
Wow. So how
Yeah, so I talk about this story in the book, and it's just got such a fun ending, Chad.
tune in to find out. How do you know if you should go to the doctor for if you should go to a surgeon or a psychologist?
Well, I think if you have back pain and you're thinking of surgery, like read the book first. That surgery, so they've done studies, and surgery for back pain versus conservative care, equally effective. But one surgery has 21 times more side effects. And so I think you do the brain mind stuff first and then have a good physical therapist to
Mhm.
make sure you get your muscles right. The big idea behind Sarno's work is it's repressed rage that causes pain. I mean, when you really understand his work, it's repressed emotions, especially rage. And so as I'm learning about his work and then marrying it with mine, with the brain, I'm like, well, how do you get the rage out? Because in his books, he's not great at teaching people, well, how do you get it out? And I had mentioned ISTDP, this therapy. It's a rage therapy. Was developed by Habib Davanloo in Canada, who's a psychoanalyst for many years. But then he's like, this stuff doesn't really work, or it takes forever. And he created intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy, which is feel what you're feeling, anxiety, depression, pain. And if it could come up, and if it could come out, where would it go?
So
And
somatic
often,
like healing, would this is in the vein of somatic healing?
no, it's different. Although people get helpful, and it's often a primary treatment for psychosomatic disorders. Um, it's really getting the rage out. And I've mixed it with EMDR. So I'll put you in a session. You might go back to when you were molested. And it's like, if the rage could come out, where would it go? And in their mind, they kill their perpetrator. Now,
Jeez.
in real
Yeah.
life, they don't.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
often come out of a session and like, oh, 4 people died today.
God, yeah, right, exactly. That was a massacre today. How many people would you say percentage wise should be doing EMDR and have trauma?
So I think everybody should know their ACE score, adverse childhood experiences, on a
There's a
scale
test
of,
in the book, right? Is there an ACE
there's a
score
test in the
is
book.
that the official test or is that
It's the original test
okay?
used in the study by the CDC
Hmm.
and Kaiser. So 0 to 10, how many bad things happened to you growing up, from physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect, witnessing domestic violence with your parents, having a parent who had an addiction, a psychiatric illness, going to jail. So of these 10 things, how many do you have? People who have 4 or more have an increased risk of 7 of the top 10 leading causes of death. And people who have 6 or more die 20 years early. But you don't have to. If there's childhood trauma, I think if you have 3 or more, EMDR could be so helpful to you, especially if you feel like you get triggered, that you're anxious and you don't know why, you get sad and you don't know why, or you are working to accomplish something, but then you hold yourself back. And I explain this in the book, but I really love this concept. When we're born, we want to bond. We have to bond.
Yeah,
It saves our life to bond
right.
because our parents feed us, clothe us, shelter us, love us. And if there's a problem, your parents get divorced or um, dad loses his job, um, we feel pain and then we feel rage, but we can't express it. In fact, just feeling it, we feel guilt about the rage. And it's that guilt about the rage that causes psychosomatic symptoms. And getting in touch with it and being able to express it helps us. Um, and I found it incredibly helpful clinically with my patients. And there's a technique in the book called emotional freedom journaling, where you take a journal, draw a line down the middle of the page, and you divide it. Each page is each 5 years of your life. So 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and so on. So for me, at 71, I'd have 14 pages. And on the left side, write down what awesome things happened in your life, because I never want people just to focus on the stress in their lives. I always want them to see themselves with the truth, balance. So what awesome things happened and what awful things happened. So when I was 4, I would stand on the stool by the stove and make candy with my grandfather, who was a candy maker. And even though now I make brain healthy chocolate, um, I loved him so much. So that would go on the left side of the page. On the right side of the page, I was beaten up by my brother nearly every day, and that was chronic stress. And so you do that for your life. Pretty soon, you know where the rage is coming from.
Yeah.
And then, either writing about it in vivid language can be really helpful, or working with a professional to help you
Yeah.
get it out.
When you and I spoke years ago, and when I was in a little bit of a bad spot and kind of felt like depressed for the first time ever in my life, and you said to do hyperbaric chamber and EMDR, and you said make a list of your top 10 traumas and then just go into EMDR and start working through them. And I tell that story to say that it's not so easy for people to even identify that they have trauma, because people are thinking about it from like a big T, little t. I feel like they don't even know that, but basically they're thinking, if it's not, sexual abuse or some sort of massive, like life threatening something, that these are not necessarily traumas. But when I did the list, which first seemed hard, I was like, but as I started to write it all down and come up with them, I probably came up with more like 20, but then like 10 emerged as the top ones. And so you sort of get into a rhythm and you're like, oh, wow. And you start to identify how much these little things, but they're etched in your mind so vividly. That's how I knew they weren't little, is that I remembered them very well. And that was where I was like, okay. And then I went through, it's completely life changing. Like that's literally the most amazing technique in therapy. It's, you need a good doctor, a good practitioner to do it. But it's completely life changing. And I think that's what I want maybe you to speak to, is like, what is trauma? Because it doesn't always feel easy to even know that you've had it, even though I would venture to say everyone has had some trauma in their life.
Oh, of course, right? I mean, living is stressful and have trauma. I just dropped a podcast with Julius Randle, who's the NBA three-time All-Star superstar, and he's smoking way too much pot. We talk about it publicly. And he
Yeah.
saw his brain and he stopped. And I told him, I said, I'm going to be your best investment. And he was known for falling apart in the playoffs. And it
Yeah.
was really unfair. But when you're in New York, it's just so painful.
Brutal. Yeah.
Just brutal. But going through his childhood trauma, but also what he would do is escape his thoughts rather than engage them. And that's what I taught him. It's
Mm.
how do you not avoid what you're thinking, but go into it,
Yeah.
see what it's connected to, because it was connected to a lot of childhood trauma. And then people like Stephen A. would have to die. Because
Right. That was another murder
victim,
within the day. He
yeah,
can be brutal, these journalists.
it can be, but just you get it out so you don't have to, it doesn't have to haunt you.
Well, I feel like that's almost like a Michael Singer thing from Untethered Soul, where like these things happen and you have to let them through you, right? They can't, like, when they stick, that's when the problems happen. These like events need to occur around you and you need to sort of let them flow through you instead of get stuck. And that kind of feels a little bit like trauma. Trauma is those things that get stuck. You give them significant meaning, you have an emotional reaction, and then there's like an etching in your body, in your soul, in your mind, of that moment that that informs your future, because essentially you're just trying to protect yourself. So, you're going into that record keeping book inside of your subconscious and you go, okay, we've been here before. How do we protect ourselves? Which isn't always productive.
No, it's absolutely not. And it gets stuck in your brain. And I remember your brain, you have the most beautiful brain. Uh, but it was busy. And
Mm.
it, if it's busy, what we see with EMDR is it actually calms it down. I bet if we rescanned you, the really pretty intense area in your emotional brain would be settled. And so many people go, oh, well, I'm going to go do psilocybin. And I'm like, why don't we do EMDR first?
I would agree with that 100%.
It's like to not put someone at risk for the disruption that happens for some people.
Well, this would be, I mean, our friend Dave Asprey would say the same thing about the order of operations. Like, there are definitely things you can get to, but like, why start at the most severe, the most difficult, the most dangerous on some level when you can start with something safe, sober, and effective, hopefully. And then, you have layers. And I totally agree with that. I think EMDR is just a process that not a lot of people have heard of. It's obviously not descriptive, and its acronym is not necessarily helping you understand what it is. So it just sounds like a procedure or something. And it's really, what does it stand for? Because everyone always asks me, because I talk about EMDR all the time. And what does it stand for again?
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And so what that means is you bring up the trauma, and the trauma for you is you lost a race you thought you should win. And then it becomes a zombie. It's just like it's The Walking Dead, right? You can't do anything about it, but it's still there. And so you bring it up, get your eyes to go back and forth, or some people do alternate tapping. So
Oh, yeah.
I have people take their hands, make them into a little butterfly, and tap on their clavicle. And you go into the feeling, into the zombie, into the memory, and just let it be, let it stay there for a bit. And then in your mind, get on a train and go back to the first time you had that thought or that feeling. And so the one that triggered you, I had a kid recently who's landing on a plane in Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden he had a panic attack. And so it's like, go into that and settled it, but then it jumped back to when he was using drugs in his early 20s and he was almost die. It's what I love, because wherever we start, I don't know if you notice this, but I've noticed it with my patients. Wherever we start, it tends to go to where it needs to go. But for peak performance, I like to put them on the train and go forward and see themselves playing at the highest level possible over and over and over again, to just build these tracks in your brain.
Do you think that there are just brains that are essentially worse or more difficult? And let's not say worse, because every brain has a potential of being beautiful, right? So, and I believe that too. But are there just some brains that are born and start off with a higher level of difficulty to be able to essentially just navigate everyday life? Do things get stuck easier? Do they have, like, I'm wondering also if people with higher levels of empathy, is that a causation essentially with anxiety? Like, are there just certain brains are there brain types as well? I'm just curious if essentially some people just get maybe not the best program loaded from the start, and they have a little more work to do.
Did you ever interview Mark Woolen? He wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You. You will love him. I did a podcast with him and I just loved him. And it's about generational trauma. But I would also say we're all very different. And depending on our parents' and grandparents' habits, we are starting with more reserve or less reserve. So if your dad smoked when he was a teenager, that put some negative epigenetic changes into his sperm making machine. If he used marijuana, that has actually been shown to make some epigenetic changes. It's not just about you, it's about generations of you. If your mom didn't want you, if she was chronically stressed, those high cortisol levels are not good for developing brains. There's a whole spectrum of how we're born, right? Some people have really healthy brains. Some people have damaged brains. We became the legal guardians for our nieces, and one of them, her mom drank when she was pregnant. And that made this girl very vulnerable. Now, often you can repair it, but everybody doesn't start the same. And I love this concept of brain reserve, the extra tissue you have to deal with whatever stress comes your way, because your whole life, you're either building it
Yeah.
or you're stealing
Yeah.
from it. One of my fun patients, his parents were, they owned the Pocono Speedway. And he was around gasoline fumes his whole life. And all of his diagnoses, well, he had a toxic looking brain. And plus, he had a head injury and so on. So it's.
These are all registering.
Yeah, it's you want to boost your reserve, which is why, quite honestly, I was completely floored when I saw your brain. I'm like, you have a stunningly beautiful brain.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad we know that. But I do wonder because, like, with my own sort of just personal orientation with life, I just don't have anxiety. And I only know that because I've had it a couple times. I'm like, wow, that was different. And I like depression. Like, I was the most depressed when I was talking to you a couple of years ago. And we were able to, get through that. And after, I was kind of like out of 10 halfway. And then I talked to you again. I'm like a 9, good. Cause you got to leave room for more, right? I mean, I was like, feel like essentially cured. So the point is that I'm not a very, actually, I took, you know who Jordan Peterson is, I'm sure. I'm friends with his daughter, Michaela. And so we had dinner just a month or so ago. And they're like, you should do the psychological test called like Understanding Yourself, I think maybe the website. And it's the one that Jordan used. It's the one they all use within, Peterson Academy and for all of their people. And so there's all the big 5 categories, right? And then it kind of breaks it down, each of the big 5 categories into subcategories. I have 3 out of 100 agreeableness. I have 4 out of 100 compassion. I have 7 out of 100 politeness, but I have very, very high, like 97 out of 100 in conscientiousness, almost the same in intelligence, and like 11 out of 100 in neuroticism. So like that's just where I orient. And I wonder if I just don't have as much my orientation, like my set point, my program that's loaded is just like my brain doesn't go there. Like if my brain looks good, it should look bad based on accidents, exposure to chemicals, but it looks good. And I just don't like, I'm not a worrier. I think everything's going to work out. I wouldn't say I'm like way Pollyanna, but I'm like, yeah, it'll be fine. Like I look to the future and think, well, maybe it'll be better than I could ever expect. Like, because I'm not neurotic. I'm generally conscientious of my surroundings, but I don't go crazy. I don't feel people's feelings, which is where I kind of go into that curiosity on that high level of empathy, correlating or causing anxiety. Because when you're feeling other people's feelings, that's overwhelming. I don't get that.
Well, the high conscientiousness goes with longevity. There was a study out of Stanford in 1921. They evaluated 1,548 10-year-old children, and then they followed them for 90 years. First, Lewis Terman, who set up the study, and then other researchers. And the don't worry, be happy people died the earliest from accidents and preventable illnesses. The people who lived the longest were conscientious. If you said you were going to show up, you live longer than everyone else.
There's another category of withdrawal. And so I have a 3 out of 100 withdrawal. Like I do what I say I'm going to do. And I do that for others, but I also do it for myself. Like I don't let myself down.
I love that. And, part of that is discipline.
Yeah.
And part of it is just you, that it's one of your core values of how you want to show up in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, I like essentially as far as pain goes, like I've been generally pretty good. I mean, I went through a little bit of a dip when we, were working together on a few things and, those sort of cascade effects from the breast implants and then the mold and the heavy metals and the gut disruption and the hormones being off. Like that stuff did sort of result in me maybe not recovering from workouts so well, but generally speaking, like pain isn't luckily part of my life.
For me, I had really bad arthritis when I was 35. And I had trouble getting off the floor playing with my kids. And then one of my patients said she stopped aspartame and her pain went away. And I'm like, I was drinking diet soda like it was my best friend because I thought it was free. And because of my
Right. It's 0 calories.
sweet tooth. And so I stopped it. My pain went away. My arthritis went away. And I'm not very smart, so I had to test it. And it came right back. There's a new study, I talk about this in the book, of they gave mice aspartame and it made them anxious. So they put it in water, just a normal dose, made the mice anxious. They gave them Valium and it calmed them down. Like, that was crazy. But the really disturbing thing in that study is their babies were anxious and never had aspartame, and their grandbabies were anxious. So it actually caused an epigenetic change, increasing anxiety in future generations. Aspartame was released around 1980. It is in 5,000 products. If you chew sugar-free gum, it's there. And it may be one of the wild cards, right? I mean, that's why I
Sure.
love Bobby Kennedy, because he's just open to the wild cards. He's
Yeah.
open to having the discussion rather than you're a quack. Don't talk to me about silly things like aspartame. We're all fine. Continue to eat the ultra processed foods and don't worry, be happy, right? That's
Right.
what we were told, but we've been lied to.
Yeah. I want to ask how you solve that. Let's say that's the case. Let's say, like, your mom drank a ton of diet soda or something like that, and maybe it's in the back of your mind. I'm curious how to solve that, but let me just add one more curiosity into this, because I just interviewed Aaron Siri, who is a lawyer, and he works on vaccine law, and he wrote a book called Vaccines Amen.
Oh,
And
I love that book.
yeah, he was RFK's. He was Bobby's lawyer for a long time. And he definitely is saying that there seems to be a strong correlation, at least, between the timelines of vaccines and sort of these childhood diseases that are occurring in maybe 50% of kids now, with, ADHD and anxiety and depression and all these different sort of conditions. And that he's pointing to the fact that there's a pretty strong correlation between that and the timing of all these vaccines, going from 3 to whatever it is now, which is so much higher. So, have you ever done any research around that, or learned anything about the effects of vaccines in kids growing up, from the difference between before all of them when they came onto the market, and where we are now?
I mean, as a child psychiatrist, and I did my psychiatric training in the early 80s, I have seen it skyrocket. Like every once a year, I'd see someone with autism, and now it's once a week. It's just insane how it has skyrocketed. ADHD is skyrocketed. And I think, and I have vaccine damaged brains. So when people go, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, that's all nonsense. They're incredibly safe. They proved it safe. I'm like, dude, you don't look at the brain. I look at the brain, and some of them are very damaged.
Wow.
Now, autism is not one thing. Sometimes it's from inflammation. Sometimes it's from toxicity. Sometimes it's from trauma. If you don't look, if you don't scan these kids, well, how do you really know what's going on in their brain? But I mean, right away, we just talked about aspartame, 1980s. In the 1980s, also aspirin went out for kids because of Reye's syndrome, and what took its place was Tylenol, which many people have believed for a long time that is potentially problematic because it disrupts detoxification pathways and liver function. And then the change in vaccines and the free availability of all these medications. And we have to be asking the question, if your mom or dad were on psychiatric drugs, what's the long-term generational impact of that? And so I think we're at least at the point where people are going, Well, let's study it. Let's study it without bias or without the pharmaceutical industry pushing us one way or
And doing the research essentially there. I mean, that's what Aaron said in the interview. Like, I mean, those are the ones that are producing the literature on it.
right. It's sort of like the NFL.
Right.
Saying that playing football does not cause. I mean, Roger Goodell was in front of Congress in 2009 saying, we don't know. We're studying the issue, which is the same thing as the tobacco companies saying they're studying lung cancer and finding no correlation. It's a conflict of interest. I've published the first and largest study on active and retired NFL players, high levels of damage. Stop lying about it. Did I tell you we're doing this study on firefighters? Because what I realized, NFL players are not heroes, they're entertainers. Firefighters are heroes, and there's a very high incidence of brain damage in firefighters. They kill themselves 40% more than the general population, which is just heartbreaking.
From the
But they're
fumes and
exposed
the toxins.
to the environmental toxins and the emotional trauma because
Sure.
every day
Yeah.
they go to work is someone's worst day of their life. And then there's a high incidence of head trauma. And so after the LA fires, our foundation gave away 100 free evaluations for firefighters, and their brains are just heartbreaking. But,
Mm.
we can make them better. You just have to be serious about it.
You talked about education, and like I think to myself how unhelpful, unproductive school is, and I wonder what you would want to add into school. And I know that you're working with DC. That's what one of the things that you mentioned. One of the things that you and I have talked about the mission that you have to get everyone to love their brain and make that a priority in people's lives. But like, what would you do to add education into schools, and how young would you add it in, and what would that curriculum look like so that people understood psychology but also biology, and understood supplements, and understood everything from aspartame to trauma? Where are we cheating humanity?
Now, in your growing up, did anybody teach you about brain health?
No, no. All this stuff is only because when it happened once I needed it, which is
Which
when
is
it's
wrong.
too late. And that most people don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the energy to go as, like I say, as hard in the pain as I do with things. And so then their life just slips. And I just also am, silly Billy. And I was like, I'm not going to allow it. I'm fixing all this. And I did.
So we have a high school course called Brain Thrive by 25. It's been taught in all 50 states. It's a 12-week, 24-hour course where we teach kids to love and care for their brain. And independent research in 16 schools showed it decreased drug, alcohol, and tobacco use, decreased depression, and improved self-esteem. A couple of years ago, we produced Brain Thrive by 5, which is sort of a preschool kindergarten course done with puppets. And we teach kids to kill the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that steal their happiness. We teach them to love their brain. We teach them to eat right for their brain. It's the question, right? Is it good for my brain or bad for it? I think, like English, you have to take over and over again, or history, you have to take it over and over again. I think you should have to take brain health over and over again, because if your brain is healthy, everything else in your life is better. I was just filming this week our Amen Whole 4 program, and I'm so excited about it. It's a 6-week foundational course and then 12 weeks mastery course. The first one is in faith-based organizations, but we're also going to do a secular program because the principles are the same. But it's the whole 4: brain, body, mind, relationships, all with a sense of meaning and purpose. So if you don't want to talk about God, at least talk about why you're on the planet and, what is your mission on the planet. And we talk about how happiness is a moral obligation. because of how you impact other people. I got that idea from my friend Dennis Prager. I just love him so much.
Mm.
And happiness is a moral obligation. Now, hedonism is the enemy of happiness because it'll wear out your pleasure centers. But the idea that, oh, I can eat right and feel better. I can think right and feel better. I can be kinder and feel better. And that hope is actually a feeling I can train,
Yeah.
because hope is just tomorrow can be better and I have a role in it. And it's not expensive. I mean, yes, you can do the expensive stuff, but asking that one question, is this good for my brain or bad for it? Well, that's not expensive. And it's like, well, how do you eat, you know, organic all the time? Probably can't, but you don't have to. But there are
Yeah.
15 foods that you either eat them organic or you don't eat them, like
Yeah.
blueberries.
It's like, how do we get doctors to prescribe that versus psych meds versus all these other things? Like, how do we get the prescription for wellness to look a lot more like this conversation?
Well, I think that's the brain health revolution that hopefully the president will get on board with early, like in Q1 of
Okay.
next
Yeah.
year.
Give me
And
an update.
hopefully you'll come to the White House
Yeah.
uh, uh,
I'd love to.
with us. And just the education has got to be everywhere. Yeah, I was talking with someone at NIH, and I'm like, I really want you to help me change psychiatry into a brain health specialty. And I could just see his brain go on tilt because it's like such a big idea,
Oh, yeah.
but it's the right idea.
Right.
This is, and I'm not opposed to medicine, but why do I get such hate? Because I'm trying to disrupt $1 trillion industry.
I mean, you're,
But we're at this moment in time where people like Bobby Kennedy and Mehmet Oz and
yeah.
Marty McCary, they're like in charge
Yeah.
of health related things. So there has never been a time since I've been a physician where we actually have the possibility of changing the discussion away from, it's not mental health. Stop calling people mental.
Right.
It's brain health. Get your brain healthy and your mind will follow. And probably one of the reasons that you don't suffer from those things is you have a healthy brain.
Yeah, that's kind of the curious question I had was is the healthy brain that leads to the positive way of thinking or like productive perhaps, or is it more of the way that I think that leads to the healthy brain, even though, despite all obstacles being chemicals, stress, crashing, all these things, it looks good. It's a curious
I
question.
think it's both,
Yeah.
right? It's always a feedback loop.
Yeah.
We train positivity bias. So I published a study this year on negativity. And the more negative you are, the less activity you have in your frontal lobes.
Hmm.
The lower your hope, the less activity you have in your frontal lobes. The lower your happiness, the less activity you have in your frontal lobes. So never let a child hit a soccer ball with their forehead. Just insanely stupid to do that. Better brain, happier, less negative. But you can also train negativity. And I start every day with today is going to be a great day. And I know I was going to talk to you, and that made me happy. Today is going
Aw.
to be a great day. And when I go to bed at night, what went well today? And I push my brain to look for the smallest things I like that will just make me happy. But, and in the book, there's this funny part of repressed rage where you can't be positive all the time. And so Pollyanna, and Pollyanna is actually one of my favorite movies. And I have 5 grandchildren. And when they get to be 7, I'm like, hey, come on over. I want you to watch Pollyanna with me. Because she teaches people to play the glad game, whatever situation you're in. What is there to be glad about? But I realized Pollyanna had to make friends with Hannibal Lecter, that you can't just be so happy and so good that you repress the things that really piss you off.
Well, as you said, confront it. Like confront the stress, the what gives you anxiety. Don't just try and push it away or medicate it. Like look at it. And just like everything, we know that when we've got stuff in our heads that seems big, right? It's the monster that keeps growing. And then as soon as we say it, it somehow makes it evaporate to some degree or become something completely different that is not nearly as threatening and not nearly as dangerous and feels so much less charged. And there's just, I think, a real benefit in putting things into the light.
Yeah, know the truth. The truth will set you free. And there's a New Testament verse that's really the anchor for the course. It's be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then you can test what God's good, pleasing, and perfect will is. So when you get a bad thought, here's the exercise I talk about in the book. When you feel sad or mad or nervous or out of control, write down what you're thinking. And then just ask yourself, is it true? And does it fit? Would a effective parent support that thought? And I get my patients always to think of, if you were a good parent, would you say that to your child? If you were a good coach or a
Mm.
good teacher, and good parents, good coaches, good teachers, notice what you do right. And then they teach you when you can do better. Bad coaches, bad parents, bad teachers, notice what you do wrong and never let you forget it. But too many people's internal chatter is that bad parent or that bad teacher, that bad coach. But thoughts, they're random. They come from all sorts of places, like your ancestors or the music you watch or the
Aspartame.
aspartame or the news you listen to.
Sure.
And I always teach my patients, just don't believe every stupid thing you think. And if you have a really bad thought, just like think of it like a lightning storm. And it's like, is it true?
Mm.
Does it fit? I had a thought recently of murdering my wife. And and it's actually quite funny. We have two German shepherds. We have a white shepherd and a German shepherd. And the German shepherd loves my wife. Like it's ridiculous that when she goes away for like 10 minutes and comes back in the house, he's so happy. He just gets flooded with love chemicals and jumps and gets all crazy. Now, when he's not here, he comes sits by me and he sort of loves me. And I just had the thought, well, if I murdered my wife, he would really love me when I came home. And then I'm like, no, I don't think so.
You heard it
Um,
here. Dr. Amen is human.
it's just, it's
It's a
just
ridiculous
a
thought. Yeah.
random, stupid
Yeah.
thought that I would never do. But so many of my patients, they get a thought and they go, oh, I'm a bad person. And it's like, did you do anything with the thought? No. So would you do anything with the thought? No.
Mm.
That's just, a chemical reaction that may have to do with aspartame.
Another amazing book. I don't know how you write so many books. It's like so impressive. Congratulations. And I'm sure you'll heal a lot of people through the words in this book, the recommendations, and a new way of treating.
Can I say one more thing that we didn't talk about? One of the things that helped me so much with the pain that I used to have, my knee, my back, my hip, my neck, is always go get an MRI. They're always abnormal. People always want to do surgery. 80% of people my age and 50% of people your age who have no pain have abnormal MRIs. It's very important to understand
Wow.
that, my L4, L5, I have no pain is completely terrible. Your brain and your body always want to heal, and they figure out a way around the abnormal neck you have. Don't let, oh, well, I have an abnormal MRI, so I have to have surgery, right?
Sure.
The surgeons totally will
Oh,
support that
Oh
because
yeah,
that's how
green
they
light.
put their
That's their job.
yeah, that's how they put their kids through school. But there's a lot of side effects. It doesn't mean you don't get surgery. It just means you do the other things first.
Right. I think that's an amazing point. Like I was asking earlier, like how do you know if you should go to your surgeon or a psychologist? Unless something is obviously seemingly imminent and in life-threatening danger, start with the small stuff. Just like, supplement wise, you can end up with psilocybin, or you can end up with ketamine, or you can end up with ibogaine or whatever the dose is that you think that you get to, but don't start there. You don't need to. It's always a pleasure. I love seeing you. I hope I see you soon. And if it has to be in DC, then so be it.
I'll let you know.
Okay. Thanks everybody for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.